34 years of chasing my family's love, distilled into 14 cold words on a screen. Don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. My heart pounded, a mix of shock and a strange relief, as if a truth I'd long buried was finally breaking free. I'm Eleanor Vance, and in that moment, staring at my father's message, my hands trembled. I typed one word back, understood. That single word wasn't just a reply, it was a declaration. It marked the end of a lifetime spent seeking approval from people who saw me as a tool, not a daughter. My fingers hesitated, hovering over the send button, knowing this choice would unravel everything. But I pressed it. That moment wasn't just a text. It was the spark that set my life ablaze, leading me to reclaim my worth. Have you ever been rejected by the very people who should love you most? Felt invisible, no matter how hard you tried to shine? I know that pain. I grew up in Boston's elite Beacon Hill, in a house that gleamed with wealth but hid a colder truth. My father, Gideon, built a real estate empire, Vance Properties, demanding perfection to uphold our family's name. My mother, Celeste, polished our public image, while my brother, Theo, was groomed to inherit it all. I was the afterthought, my achievements, straight A's, law school honors, never enough to earn their pride. I moved to Chicago, built a career as a lawyer, and found love with Julian, a man they dismissed for his humble roots. Yet, even from afar, their expectations chained me. 3 years ago, I co-signed a $1.5 million loan for their business, believing family helps family. Then came that text, a blade cutting me out. It wasn't just rejection, it was betrayal. I'd been used, my value tied to their bottom line, not my heart. That message forced me to face a choice: stay tethered to their conditional love or break free to define my own worth. What would you do if your family turned their back on you? Stay with me to hear how I fought for my freedom. If you've ever felt unseen, unvalued, or pushed aside by those meant to lift you up, you're not alone. This story is for you, those who've carried the weight of others' expectations, only to realize your worth isn't theirs to define. I'm sharing my journey not just to recount pain, but to show how breaking free can lead to a life that's truly yours. In the moments after that text, I made a choice that shook my world. I removed my name from that $1.5 million loan, sparking a confrontation that exposed my family's lies. If you've ever had to stand up to family or walk away to find yourself, hit that subscribe button now. Join me as we dive into a childhood of pressure, a betrayal that cut deep, and a fight for freedom that changed everything. Share your own story in the comments. Have you ever had to let go to grow? Let's walk this path together and uncover how one word, understood, became my rebellion and my redemption. Don't miss what comes next. Picture a brownstone in Boston's Beacon Hill, its polished brass doors gleaming under gaslit street lamps, a symbol of wealth and status. That was my childhood home, a place featured in Architectural Digest, where every detail screamed perfection. But behind those doors, I learned early that love came with conditions. I'm Eleanor Vance, and my family was a carefully crafted facade. My father, Gideon Vance, was the architect of a real estate empire, Vance Properties, a name whispered with reverence in Boston's elite circles. He ruled our home like he ruled his boardroom, demanding loyalty and flawless performance to uphold the family legacy. My mother, Celeste, was the master of appearances, orchestrating charity galas and social events to keep our name shining. Every smile, every gesture, was calculated to maintain our place among the city's untouchables. My older brother, Theo, was their golden child, groomed from birth to inherit the empire. His charm and confidence were their pride, the embodiment of everything they valued. I was the quiet one, the serious one, always watching from the edges, my existence measured against their expectations. To them, I wasn't a daughter with dreams, I was a piece of their puzzle, meant to fit perfectly or be discarded. Growing up, I felt the weight of their gaze, judging every step, every word. Have you ever lived in a home where you felt like a guest, always proving your worth? That was my reality, a childhood spent chasing a love that always seemed just out of reach, conditional on my ability to reflect their glory. In our family, Theo was the sun, and I was a shadow trailing behind. My brother, 3 years older, had a natural charisma that lit up every room. Dad would beam when Theo recounted his latest debate win or a handshake with some senator's son, saying, "That's my boy, the future of Vance Properties." Meanwhile, I'd sit at the dinner table, clutching my report card with straight A's, only to hear, "Eleanor, pass the potatoes." My achievements were footnotes, barely acknowledged unless they served the family image. Theo's soccer games drew crowds, my academic awards drew polite nods. I remember one evening, I spent hours preparing a presentation for a school science fair, winning first place. Dad didn't ask about it, he was too busy praising Theo's speech at a charity auction. "Theo knows how to work a room," he'd say, as if my quiet diligence was a flaw. Mom wasn't much different. She'd critique my posture, my lack of social grace, urging me to be more like Theo, more outgoing, more visible. Have you ever felt like your best wasn't enough because it didn't fit someone else's mold? I poured my heart into books, into ideas, but they wanted a performer, not a thinker. Theo wasn't cruel, he was just their ideal, and I was the outlier. Every comparison carved a little deeper, teaching me my value lay in how well I could mirror their expectations, not in who I was. That constant measuring stick shaped me, but it also sparked a quiet rebellion, a need to prove I was more than their shadow. When I was 12, I won a statewide essay contest, a moment I thought might finally make them see me. I'd spent weeks crafting my piece, pouring my heart into every word, dreaming of their pride. The award ceremony was a big deal, local papers covered it, and I was set to be interviewed. I could already imagine Dad's rare smile, Mom's warm hug. But the morning of the event, Mom scheduled a hair appointment for me, right during the interview slot. "The Vance family presents as a unit," she said, her voice sharp, as if my moment in the spotlight threatened their carefully curated image. I sat in the salon, watching the clock tick past my chance to speak, my essay clutched in my hands, unread by them. Later, the newspaper ran a family photo, Theo front and center, grinning, while I stood to the side, barely visible. Dad framed it, hung it in his office, calling it a proud day for the Vances. My victory was theirs, but not mine. Have you ever had your moment stolen, turned into someone else's story? I went to bed that night, staring at my certificate, feeling smaller than ever. They didn't read my essay, didn't ask about my words. It wasn't about me, it was about their name. That day taught me a harsh truth. My worth to them wasn't in my heart or my mind, it was in how well I could uphold their legacy, a lesson that would echo for years. My 10th birthday is a memory that still stings, a wound that never quite healed. I was so excited, spending days planning a small party, stringing up streamers in our living room, imagining my parents' laughter as I blew out the candles. I'd picked out a cake, chocolate, my favorite, and practiced my wish, hoping for a day where I felt truly seen. But the night before, Mom sat me down, her face apologetic but firm. "Eleanor, we have a charity gala tomorrow. It's important for the family. We'll celebrate another time." I nodded, swallowing my disappointment, but inside, I was crumbling. The next day, I stood alone in that decorated room, balloons sagging as the hours passed. Through the window, I watched their car pull away, taillights fading into the Boston night. Have you ever felt abandoned in a moment meant for you? I ate a slice of cake alone, the sweetness bitter on my tongue. They didn't come home until midnight, their voices bright with gala stories, no mention of my birthday. The next day, Dad handed me a card with cash inside, saying, "Buy something nice." But no gift could replace the emptiness of that day. It wasn't just a missed party, it was a message. Their priorities, image, status, Vance Properties, came before me. That lonely birthday planted a seed of doubt, whispering that I'd always be secondary to their ambitions, a truth I'd carry into adulthood. By high school, I knew I had to carve my own path, away from the Vance family script. I dreamed of studying law, not to join Vance Properties, but to build something of my own. When I got into Yale Law School, it felt like a lifeline, a chance to define myself. But my parents had other plans. "Harvard's closer," Dad said, his tone implying it wasn't a suggestion. "You can work with us, keep the family close." I saw it then. They didn't want me to succeed, they wanted me to serve their legacy. Have you ever had to defy expectations to chase your truth? I chose Yale, against their wishes, knowing it meant standing alone. To pay tuition, I worked 3 jobs, tutoring, waitressing, late-night library shifts, exhausted but determined. Each paycheck was a step toward freedom, proof I didn't need their approval to thrive. Yale wasn't just a school, it was my rebellion, my declaration that I was more than their shadow, more than a name. I'd spent years trying to fit their mold, but that choice, to walk my own path, lit a spark that would guide me through the betrayal to come. Leaving Boston was like stepping out of a cage I'd been locked in my whole life. Chicago was my fresh start, a city where the skyline promised possibility, not pressure. I'm Eleanor Vance, and at 26, I landed in a world that didn't know the Vance name or care about my family's legacy. I joined Caldwell and Sterling, a top-tier law firm, as a junior associate, determined to build something that was mine. My apartment was small, a 1-bedroom with creaky floors and a view of a brick wall, but it felt like a palace because I paid for it with my own sweat. At the firm, I wasn't Gideon Vance's daughter or Theo's overshadowed sister, I was Eleanor, the lawyer who stayed late, poring over case files, earning respect for my work, not my last name. I remember my first big win, a pro bono case for a single mother facing eviction. When we saved her home, my colleague Lila Sterling high-fived me, saying, "You're a force, Eleanor." That moment hit me hard. Someone saw my worth, not my lineage. I climbed the ranks to senior associate, each promotion a brick in the foundation of a life I was building for myself. Have you ever found a place where you could finally be you, unburdened by others' expectations? Chicago was that for me. I walked its streets, feeling the weight of Beacon Hill lift, replaced by a quiet pride. I wasn't perfect, but I was enough. The firm's partners, like Victor Caldwell, noticed my drive, assigning me high-stakes cases that sharpened my skills and confidence. I'd spent my childhood chasing my family's approval, but in Chicago, I was learning to define my own worth. That freedom was intoxicating, yet fragile, because even thousands of miles away, my family's shadow lingered, waiting to pull me back. In Chicago, I found more than a career, I found someone who saw me for me. His name was Julian Carter, a high school history teacher with a laugh that could light up the darkest room. We met at a charity event, one of those crowded galas I'd learned to navigate in Boston but never enjoyed. I was there representing Caldwell and Sterling, feeling out of place among the chatter and clinking glasses. Julian stood out, not because he was loud or flashy, but because he was real. He was volunteering, serving drinks with a genuine smile, not networking for status like everyone else. We got talking about education reform, and his passion for his students, kids from tough neighborhoods, drew me in. He didn't care about my last name or my family's wealth, he asked about my dreams, my fears. Have you ever met someone who made you feel truly seen, like your story mattered? That was Julian. He shared stories of his students' triumphs, his eyes bright with pride, and I found myself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in years. We swapped numbers, and soon, coffee dates turned into late-night walks along Lake Michigan, where I'd open up about the pressure of growing up a Vance. Julian listened, never judging, his steady presence a balm to wounds I hadn't realized I carried. He wasn't rich or connected, just a man with a big heart, teaching me that value wasn't in titles or wealth but in kindness and purpose. I'd spent my life trying to fit my family's mold, but with Julian, I could be messy, human, enough. Our relationship grew, rooted in shared values, hard work, integrity, helping others. He'd tease me about my lawyer jargon, and I'd joke about his history nerd obsessions, but beneath it all was a bond that felt like home. For the first time, I wasn't performing for approval. I was building a life with someone who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. I thought bringing Julian to Boston for Thanksgiving would show my family I'd built something real. I was wrong. We arrived at our Beacon Hill brownstone, the table set with Mom's crystal and Dad's expectations. I'd hoped they'd see Julian's warmth, his strength, but from the moment we sat down, the air was thick with judgment. Mom, ever the social orchestrator, asked Julian about his subway commute to work, her tone dripping with condescension, as if teaching high school was beneath us. Dad barely spoke to him, focusing instead on Theo's fiancée, Beatrice, daughter of a senator, whose every word was met with praise. Beatrice understands legacy, Dad said, glancing at me as if I'd failed some unspoken test. Have you ever brought someone you love to a place where they're dismissed? Julian stayed gracious, squeezing my hand under the table, but I saw the hurt in his eyes. I tried to share my latest case win at Caldwell and Sterling, hoping for a shred of pride, but Mom cut me off to gush about Beatrice's charity work. Theo, usually the golden child, stayed quiet, his face unreadable. The meal dragged on, each slight cutting deeper, reminding me I'd never be enough in their eyes. Julian wasn't elite enough for them, and neither was I. Driving back to Chicago, I felt the old wounds reopen, the familiar sting of being less than. But Julian's hand on mine, his quiet, "You're enough for me," planted a seed of defiance. I wasn't just their daughter anymore, I was building a life they couldn't define. Back in Chicago, I sent my parents an academic article I'd published, a piece I was proud of, hoping they'd finally see my worth. They didn't read it. Instead, Mom texted, "When will you join Vance Properties?" That question was a reminder. To them, I was a means to an end, not a person with dreams. But with Julian, I found freedom. Walking Chicago's streets at night, the city lights reflecting off the river, I told him about my family's dismissal, my fear of never being enough. He listened, then said, "You're more than their approval, Eleanor. You're you." Have you ever had someone remind you of your own light? Those words lifted a weight I'd carried for years. With Julian, I wasn't chasing validation, I was living it. For the first time, I could breathe, unburdened by their expectations. Our late-night talks, his unwavering belief in me, showed me a truth I'd forgotten: my worth wasn't theirs to measure. It was mine to claim. 3 years ago, I made a choice I thought would bridge the gap between me and my family. I'm Eleanor Vance, and at 31, I was still chasing the approval I'd never won growing up in Beacon Hill. My father, Gideon, called me one evening, his voice smooth but commanding, like he was closing a deal. Vance Properties, his real estate empire, needed a $1.5 million loan to secure a new project, and he wanted me to co-sign. "Your credit score is impeccable, Eleanor," he said. "This is how family helps family." Those words hit me hard. For once, it felt like he saw my value, not just Theo's charm or Mom's social finesse. I hesitated, though. Julian, my partner, warned me about the risks, his brow furrowed as he asked, "Are you sure they're not using you?" But I brushed it off. Have you ever wanted so badly to belong that you ignored your gut? I did. I signed the papers, believing this act would finally earn me a place in their world. I imagined Dad's rare nod of approval, maybe even a "well done, Eleanor." The loan went through, securing better terms because of my name, my credit. I felt a flicker of pride, thinking I'd contributed to the family legacy. But deep down, a quiet unease lingered. I'd tied myself to their empire, not knowing it was a chain, not a bond. I told myself it was a one-time sacrifice, a way to prove I was more than the overlooked daughter. Looking back, I see it now, that signature wasn't about trust or love. It was about their bottom line, and I was just a means to an end. That choice, born of hope, would soon unravel into a betrayal I never saw coming. I was in the middle of a boardroom, presenting a billion-dollar merger for Caldwell and Sterling, when my phone buzzed. I'm Eleanor Vance, and that moment is seared into my memory, a fracture that split my life in two. I glanced at my screen, expecting a work email, but it was a text from my father. Gideon, don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties for the sake of the business. 14 words, sharp as a blade, slicing through 34 years of trying to earn their love. My heart stopped, but I kept talking, my voice steady as I pitched to senior partners, while inside, I was crumbling. Have you ever felt your world collapse in a single moment? I did. Those words weren't just rejection, they were erasure, as if I'd never been part of their story. I stood there, PowerPoint slides clicking forward, but my mind replayed every sacrifice, every late night studying, every attempt to make them proud. And for what? To be discarded like a failed investment. My fingers hovered over my phone, torn between rage and heartbreak. I wanted to call, to demand answers, but I knew Gideon's voice would be cold, final. Instead, I typed one word, understood. It wasn't surrender, it was a quiet rebellion, a line drawn in the sand. That single word held my pain, my defiance, my decision to stop begging for their approval. As I hit send, something shifted. The boardroom faded, and I saw clearly, I'd been a pawn in their game, valued only for what I could give, not who I was. That text wasn't just a dismissal, it was a revelation. It forced me to face a truth I'd avoided. My family's love was conditional, and I'd spent my life chasing a prize that didn't exist. In that moment, I knew I had to choose, stay tethered to their betrayal or fight for my own freedom. The sting of my father's text lingered, but the real blow came later that night. I'm Eleanor Vance, and as I scrolled through Instagram, numb from Gideon's words, I stumbled across a post from my cousin, a carefree snapshot of a family reunion invitation. My breath caught. The elegant card, embossed with the Vance crest, was sent to everyone, aunts, uncles, even distant cousins, but not me. They'd lied, claiming I was too busy, as if I'd chosen to be excluded. Have you ever been erased from a moment meant to unite? I felt it then, a gut punch of betrayal, like I was no longer part of the family I'd spent my life trying to please. The post showed Theo's smiling face, Mom's curated elegance, Dad's commanding presence, all planning a celebration I wasn't welcome to. It wasn't just the reunion, it was the realization that they'd planned this exclusion, discussed it, agreed to cut me out. My finger hovered over the screen, tempted to comment, to call them out, but what would it change? They'd chosen their image over me, their legacy over my heart. I closed the app, my chest tight with a mix of anger and clarity. That Instagram post wasn't just a party invite, it was proof of their priorities. I wasn't their daughter, I was a liability, a name on a loan they needed but a person they could discard. That moment stripped away the last illusion I'd clung to, forcing me to see my family for what they were. I wasn't just uninvited, I was unwanted, and that truth, painful as it was, lit a fire in me to take back my power. Alone in the office bathroom, staring at my reflection, I felt the weight of 34 years crash down. I'm Eleanor Vance, and in that moment, Gideon's text and that Instagram post burned in my mind, exposing a truth I could no longer ignore. I'd never been their daughter, only their asset. My hands shook as I gripped the sink, tears threatening to spill, but a voice inside me whispered, "You don't owe them anything." Have you ever reached a breaking point where you knew you had to choose yourself? That was mine. I'd co-signed a $1.5 million loan for Vance Properties, tying my future to their empire, believing it would earn me their love. But love doesn't demand your signature on a dotted line. It doesn't cast you out via text. I wiped my tears, straightened my shoulders, and made a call to Nora Bennett, my lawyer. Her voice was calm, steady, as she walked me through the risks of staying on that loan, my credit, my savings, my entire life at stake if Vance Properties faltered. "You can withdraw," she said, and those words felt like permission to reclaim my life. I spent hours that night, poring over documents, my heart racing as I realized the depth of what I'd signed away. It wasn't just money, it was my autonomy, my trust, given to people who saw me as a means to an end. I thought of Julian, his warnings about my family's motives, his belief in my worth. I thought of the girl who decorated her 10th birthday alone, the teenager who begged for their pride, the woman who'd built a career they never valued. No more. I called Nora back and said, "Get me off that loan." The next day, I signed the paperwork, each stroke of the pen a declaration of independence. It wasn't revenge, it was self-preservation. Have you ever had to break a chain to save yourself? I did, knowing it would cost me my family, but also knowing I couldn't live as their pawn anymore. That signature wasn't just a legal act, it was a vow to myself. My worth wasn't their approval, their legacy, or their empire. It was me, and I was done letting them define it. As I left the lawyer's office, a weight lifted, replaced by a quiet strength. I'd chosen myself, and no text, no exclusion, could take that away. I walked into the Palmer house, its grand chandeliers casting light on a moment I'd both dreaded and craved. I'm Eleanor Vance, and this was the day I'd face my family, not as their dutiful daughter, but as a woman reclaiming her life. My father's text, "Don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties," still burned in my mind, a wound that pushed me to withdraw my name from their $1.5 million loan. Now, I stood in a private meeting room, the air thick with tension, facing Gideon and Celeste Vance. My father sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid, his eyes cold, as if I were a disloyal employee, not his daughter. My mother, ever the peacemaker, adjusted her pearls, her smile tight, like she could smooth over decades of neglect with a few soft words. I'd spent 34 years chasing their approval, shrinking myself to fit their mold, but no more. Have you ever stood up to someone who shaped your world, knowing it might break it? I took a deep breath, my voice steady but low, and began. "I removed my name from the loan," I said, watching Gideon's jaw tighten. "It was my choice, just like your text was yours." He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Vindictive, Eleanor. You're hurting the family, the business." I expected that, his empire always came first. But his words didn't shake me this time. I listed their slights, each one a stone I'd carried too long. "You missed my award ceremony when I was 12, left my law school graduation early for Theo's event, dismissed Julian because he's a teacher, not a tycoon." My mother's eyes flickered with discomfort, but she tried to deflect. "That text was poorly worded, dear," she said, her voice syrupy, as if a rewrite could erase the betrayal. I shook my head. "It wasn't just words, Mom. It was truth. You've never seen me as enough unless I served your image." Gideon scoffed, but I saw a crack in his armor, a flicker of unease. I wasn't the quiet girl they could ignore anymore. "Have you ever spoken a truth so raw it scared you?" I did, and it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing I might fall but refusing to back down. This wasn't just about a loan or a text, it was about 34 years of being invisible unless I fit their script. I stood taller, ready for whatever came next, because I wasn't here to plead. I was here to be heard. Just as the room grew heavy with silence, the door opened, and my brother, Theo, walked in. I'm Eleanor Vance, and in that moment, I braced myself, expecting him to side with our parents, the golden child defending their legacy. Theo had always been their pride, groomed to lead Vance Properties, his charm a shield I could never wield. But his face was different today, tense, almost haunted. He didn't sit, just stood by the table, his hands in his pockets, his eyes avoiding Dad's. "Eleanor's right," he said, his voice low but firm, and I froze. "Have you ever been stunned by an ally you never expected?" I was. Theo looked at me, then at our parents, and dropped a bombshell. Vance Properties was on the brink of bankruptcy 3 years ago, he said. Dad didn't tell you, Eleanor, but he used your name on more than just that $1.5 million loan. My heart sank, a cold dread creeping in. Theo continued, his words measured but cutting. He forged your signature on 2 other loans, equipment financing in 2020 and a credit line in 2021. I found the documents last month. The room spun. Forged signatures. My name, my future, used without my consent. I stared at Gideon, waiting for a denial, but his silence was deafening, his face a mask of defiance tinged with shame. Celeste gasped, her hand at her throat, clearly unaware. Gideon, is this true? She asked, her voice trembling. He didn't answer, just glared at Theo, as if his betrayal cut deeper than mine. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the weight of their manipulation exposed. You used me, I said, my voice breaking, not from sadness but from rage. Not as a daughter, but as a financial pawn. Theo's eyes met mine, filled with something I hadn't seen before, regret. He spoke again, softer now. I didn't know at first, Eleanor. When I found out, I confronted him. He said it was for the family, but it was for him. Have you ever learned a truth that rewrote your past? This one did. Every moment I'd spent seeking their approval, every sacrifice, was built on a lie. Theo's revelation wasn't just about money, it was about trust, or the lack of it. I'd been a tool, not a person, in their eyes. My mother's face crumpled, torn between loyalty to Gideon and the reality of his deceit. My brother's words hung in the air, a bridge between us for the first time, but also a wall between me and the family I'd once fought to belong to. I stood there, heart pounding, knowing this truth would change everything. The air in the Palmer House meeting room crackled with the weight of Theo's revelation. I'm Eleanor Vance, and for the first time, I saw my father, Gideon, not as the untouchable titan of my childhood, but as a man who'd built his empire on lies. My voice rose, steady but fierce. You used me, Dad. You forged my name, risked my future, for your legacy. Not ours, yours. His eyes narrowed, but I didn't flinch. I'd spent my life shrinking to fit his vision, but no more. Have you ever faced someone who shaped your pain, knowing the truth might break you both? I did. Gideon leaned forward, his voice low, venomous. Everything I did was for this family, Eleanor. You're too selfish to see it. Selfish. The word stung, but it didn't land like it used to. I shot back, selfish? I co-signed your loan, tied my life to your business, because I wanted to be enough for you. But you betrayed me. Celeste tried to intervene, her voice shaky. Let's calm down, Eleanor. We're still a family. But I wasn't having it. A family doesn't forge signatures, Mom. A family doesn't disown their daughter via text. Theo spoke up, his tone heavy with disgust. I refused a promotion at Vance Properties, Dad. I'm ashamed of what you've done. His words hit like a thunderclap, and for a moment, Gideon faltered, his facade cracking. Have you ever seen someone's world crumble under the weight of their own lies? I saw it in my father's eyes, a flicker of vulnerability he quickly buried. He stood, his chair scraping the floor, and pointed at me. You've always been ungrateful, he said, but his voice lacked its usual command. I stood too, meeting his gaze. I'm done being your pawn. You built an empire on lies, and I won't carry that weight anymore. Celeste reached for him, her face a mix of shock and sorrow, but he brushed her off. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in with the truth we'd all avoided for too long. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for the girl who'd spent decades believing she wasn't enough. This confrontation wasn't about winning, it was about breaking free. As Gideon's words hung in the air, I knew there was nothing left to say. I'm Eleanor Vance, and in that moment, I felt the weight of 34 years lift. My father stood, his face a mask of anger, and stormed out of the Palmer House meeting room, leaving only silence in his wake. My mother, Celeste, hesitated, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, caught between loyalty to him and the truth she couldn't unhear. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," she whispered, her voice breaking, before following him out. "Have you ever walked away from a life you thought you needed?" "I did." I turned to Theo, who stood quietly, his expression a mix of resolve and regret. "I'm proud of you," he said softly, the first time he'd ever said those words. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat tight with a mix of pain and gratitude. I walked out of the Palmer house, the Chicago rain falling like a curtain, washing away the last traces of their hold on me. Each step felt lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because I'd chosen myself. The truth, Gideon's lies, my family's betrayal, had shattered the illusion I'd clung to, but it also set me free. I wasn't their daughter anymore, not in the way they wanted. I was Eleanor, a woman who'd built her own life, who'd found love with Julian, who'd earned respect at Caldwell and Sterling. The rain soaked my coat, but I didn't care. Have you ever felt freedom in letting go? I stood there, under the city's lights, knowing I'd never go back. The confrontation at Palmer House didn't just break my family's illusion, it reshaped their world. I'm Eleanor Vance, and after I walked away, having exposed my father's lies and withdrawn my name from their $1.5 million loan, Vance Properties felt the ripple effects. Without my credit, they scrambled to secure new financing, but the terms were harsher, interest rates higher, a blow to Gideon's carefully curated empire. My father, always the unyielding titan, refused to admit defeat, but the cracks in his legacy were undeniable. My mother, Celeste, made a choice that stunned me. She left Gideon, moving to a quiet house in Connecticut, away from Boston's glittering facade. Months later, when Julian and I got engaged, she sent a bouquet of white roses with a note, "I'd love to be at your wedding, Eleanor." Her words carried a weight of regret, a longing to mend what was broken, but I wasn't ready to respond. Have you ever received an olive branch that felt too late? Then came an email from Gideon, brief and formal, hinting at reconciliation without an apology. I read it, my heart heavy but unmoved, and left it unanswered. Their crisis, financial, personal, was no longer mine to carry. I'd spent my life tethered to their expectations, believing my worth depended on their approval, but now I saw clearly, their struggles were theirs alone. Vance Properties might endure, but it would do so without me as its pawn. For the first time, I felt unburdened, my future no longer tied to their bottom line. I'd walked away from their empire, and in doing so, I'd begun to build my own, a life defined by my choices, not their demands. For years, my brother Theo was the golden child, the heir to Vance Properties, a mirror of everything our parents valued. But after Palmer House, something shifted. I'm Eleanor Vance, and Theo's choice to expose our father's forged signatures changed more than just my story, it changed us. He reached out, inviting Julian and me to dinner in Chicago with his wife, Beatrice. I hesitated, unsure if I could trust the brother I'd always envied, but I went. Over a quiet meal, Theo looked at me, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," he said. "I didn't see how they treated you until it was too late. Have you ever heard an apology that healed a wound you didn't know was there?" His words did that. Theo shared his own struggles, his decision to step back from Vance Properties, wanting a different legacy for his unborn child. For the first time, we weren't rivals, we were siblings, building a bond free from our parents' shadow. Beatrice, warm and grounded, encouraged us, her presence a reminder that family could be chosen, not just inherited. We laughed, shared stories of our childhoods, and I saw Theo not as the favored son, but as someone who'd been trapped in his own way. Our dinners became regular, a tentative bridge growing stronger with each meeting. I realized I'd gained something I never expected, a brother who saw me, not as a threat, but as a partner in rewriting our story. That connection, fragile but real, showed me that family wasn't just blood, it was the people who chose to stand by you when the masks came off. The moment Julian slid a ring onto my finger, surrounded by close friends in a small Chicago loft, I felt something new. I was enough. I'm Eleanor Vance, and that engagement party wasn't just a celebration of love, it was a declaration of my worth. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the warmth of Julian's hand in mine, it was a world I'd built, far from the cold expectations of Beacon Hill. Later that night, I sat with my journal, writing words I'd never dared to believe. I'm no longer the girl begging for their love. Have you ever felt whole in a way you never thought possible? I did. Therapy with Dr. Levine had been my lifeline, helping me unravel the knots of my childhood, the years spent chasing approval that never came. She taught me that my value wasn't tied to my family's name or their empire, but to who I was, flaws, dreams, and all. Each session peeled back layers of doubt, showing me that the rejection I'd faced wasn't about my worth, but their limitations. Julian, with his unwavering belief in me, mirrored that truth every day, his love a steady anchor. At Caldwell and Sterling, I was on track for partnership, my work respected, my voice heard. That night, as I looked around at the people who chose me, Julian, Theo, my colleagues, I realized family wasn't the one I was born into, it was the one I'd created. I'd spent decades trying to fit a mold that wasn't mine, but now, I was free to be Eleanor, unapologetically. That freedom, hard-won and precious, was my true legacy. I'm Eleanor Vance, and walking away from my family was the hardest choice I ever made. That text from my father, "Don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties," was a wound, but it was also a wake-up call. For 34 years, I chased their love, believing my worth depended on their approval. But standing in the rain outside the Palmer house, I realized something: my value isn't tied to their expectations, their empire, or their name. It's in me, my choices, my heart, my life. Have you ever had to let go of someone to find yourself? It's painful, but it's freeing. I built a life in Chicago with Julian, with friends who see me, with a career that reflects my strength. My family's rejection didn't break me, it taught me to define my own worth. You don't need anyone's permission to live your truth. Your story, your struggles, your dreams, they're enough. Take it from me, letting go of conditional love opens the door to a life that's truly yours. If my story resonates, I'm asking you to do something bold. This week, write down one thing you'll do to honor your worth. Maybe it's setting a boundary, chasing a dream, or simply saying, "I'm enough." Have you ever taken a step to reclaim your value? Share it in the comments below. Your story could inspire someone else. I'm Eleanor Vance, and I'm building a community here for those who felt unseen, unvalued, but are ready to rise. Hit that like button if you've ever fought for your own freedom. Subscribe to join me on this journey of self-discovery. We're stronger together. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't tied to anyone's approval. Join our #HonorYourWorth challenge on the community post. Let's hold each other accountable to live authentically. My one word, understood, was my rebellion, my redemption. What's yours? Let's find it together. Your worth isn't their validation, it's you, and that's enough. Keep watching, keep sharing, and let's build a life that's ours.